Okay, I think the first thing is not so important. Let's just start with belonging. Is it still coming up? Yeah. Let me just see if it's really. Does it say recording on your?
Yes.
Oh, cool, awesome. All right. So let's go to that belonging. So who belongs to a family? Or do you want me to start again for the recording? What? No,
Maybe
are you all right?
briefly, maybe.
Briefly, okay. I just summarize it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So okay. So just briefly, I just probably bring up the charts again. So starting here with part 1, 2, and 3 of the module 1. So today we're talking about the first order of love, tomorrow about the second order of love, and on Sunday about the third order of love, which you can see here. Today we're talking about the first order of love, which is specifically belonging, destiny, conscience, and guilt. So we will go through all these words and what they mean and what they mean in a family constellation. So what is to expect is what we do today is we are looking at family systems, and just briefly I repeat what I haven't recorded before. We are talking about systems because we are talking about a family system, and a system is an organized field. So we have a field, and it could be either chaotic, a group of people or a group of beings are forming a field because they have the same intention and somehow, or something is unifying them. That's then becomes a field, and then it can be either chaotic or it can be organized. And when it's organized, it's becoming a system. And when we're talking about families, we are talking about a family system because it's an organized field of the people who are related in some way, and that's what we look at in more detail, how they are related. We are talking about belonging because we need to know who are the people who are belonging to a family system in order to work with them and to understand them. We are talking about conscience, the personal, collective, and spiritual conscience, which is one of the topics that Bert Hellinger has great insights in, and he has studied it for decades and had wonderful findings that are helping us really to understand interpersonal relationships and the relationship to the family a lot better. We're talking about destiny. It's especially about free choice. So where does free choice comes in when we talk about destiny? And guilt, fear, and the death or the dead in the family system, which also plays a big role. Now, family systems. What is a system? I just briefly explained that, organized fields. So I go quickly through that. So the family is an organized field, and we need to know who belongs to this field. And we need to know how do we, what does a family constellation mean in regards to family systems. And that's what we are looking at when we are going through this module. So now here we are. Let's go. Belonging. Family members belonging to a family who are related through the bloodline. I also throw in the word here epigenetic inheritance without, going into detail because it's coming up. So just that you heard this word before. So family members who belong to family systems are those who are blood related. That's very easy, right? Okay. Then who belongs to family system are these people who are bound together by destiny. And we will look at all of these possibilities and relationships in greater detail. These are partners and former partners. And these are adopting parents. And these are, that's for now. And then who belongs also to the family system are victims and perpetrators. And we have advantage and disadvantage giver and receiver. That's a literal translation from German for Nachteilsgeber. I don't know whether it's good English or not, but we just keep it. We just use it because I wouldn't know how to make up a better English word for it. But you will understand when we talk about it in detail. To the family system belong as well the lost children, the forgotten or the dismissed persons, and the dead. So this is a list. They belong to the family system. And don't worry too much about writing it all down, because you have the video recordings. Don't forget that. And you can stop and write it down. So, just listen and let it sink in. Don't be too detailed at this stage. We just started. There's so many more information coming. Yeah. I don't want you to be holed up with so many information right now. Okay. So here comes my little animation. So in order to visualize who belongs to a family system, I made this little animation. So it all starts with you. You meaning the person who is coming to a family constellation, or you who is on a path of personal growth and want to understand more about your family. So you are the first generation. The second generation is your parents. So I have a blue color here for your father and a pink for your mother. Also to see to make sure that we have a visual where the bloodline goes. So that's the second generation. Then we have the third generation, which are the grandparents. So now you have already 2 grandparents, 2 blue and 2 pink, right? And this is the third generation. Now we have the great grandparents, which is the fourth generation, and we're talking about the blood related. That's all the physical, the sperm and the egg persons, right? What we are talking about. Regardless if they met briefly for a fling or they lived together a lifetime, doesn't matter, right? Whoever was the sperm and whoever was the egg, this is what you see here. And then we have the ancestors, which is 5th to 7th generation. And I didn't count them. There are more than that. I just didn't want to animate so many little creatures. Can you see how vast the family system is just by that? It's absolutely staggering. And these are only the direct blood related, only mothers and fathers. Nobody else for now. Already resulting in so many persons who are playing a role in a family system. And then, of course, we have the source. So just as a side note here, the source, or however you want to call it, some call it God, some call it the divine, some call it whatever, where life comes from, yeah, is part of the family system. Just make a note of that, because it might play a role in a family constellation. And there are others. So first of all, there are siblings. Now, siblings do belong to a family system, however, only in the first 3 generations. Just imagine how many more family members we would have in the system if we would go from generation 4 to 7 with all the siblings of these people. Interestingly, and that is what Bert Hellinger's his heritage and his great findings is that they actually, the family system, in order to be organized, there seems to be like a tipping point where an organized system tips over into chaotic, into chaos, when it ceases to be a system, right? And it would tip over and become chaotic if there would be all aunties and nannies and whoever, aunties and uncles and cousins and everybody in 7 generation part of the family system, from your perspective, from you being the first, right? And that is a really interesting thing that you need to understand when you are working with family constellations, that it stops there. The siblings are part of the family system, but only in the first 3 generations. Yeah? And then we have more. The siblings obviously are still blood related. So that's quite obvious that they are part of the family system. But now it comes to to less obvious members of the family system, which are, hang on, there's a chat, just checking who said something. Okay. Which are, where are they coming up now? Oh, every time I do something on my screen, it stops sharing. What am I doing here? That's not good. The little, you don't see that, eh? What I just did.
No, we have the photos in there. Yeah.
Bugger. I have to, how do I do that? I stop sharing and share again. That's a new problem I haven't had so far. So I have to figure that out. What happened here? Okay, now I have added. Okay, I go quickly through here again. Okay. So we had the siblings, we just talked about the siblings, and now we talk about the green people, which are partners and former partners. So obviously they are not blood related, but they are still part of the family system. But, however, they are not, again, part of the whole part of the family system in 7 generations. They stop also in generation 3, most of the time already in generation 2, where they play a vital role in a family constellation, but definitely not going further than 3 generations. And just imagine former partners and how many people that could be. And then imagine that in 7 generations. So you can already see how then this all would tip into chaos, right? Where kind of the structure is not hold up again. So, and then we have more. We have these red people, and that are perpetrators. So the perpetrators are people, and we talk about that in great depth. They play a vital role in family constellation, and they belong to a family system through action. And now the perpetrator, they can be in all 7 generations. So they go through all 7. They don't stop in the 3rd generation. They go through all. They can be everywhere. And on the other hand, where they are perpetrators, they are also victims. So victims are also playing or belonging to the family system and playing a role in family constellation back 7 generations. Right? So once you know who belongs to the system, and you go through all of this in family constellation, you will meet perpetrators, victims, entangled siblings, all the way to the source. And when you have resolved everything, hopefully, you leave everything behind and are free to live your own life. That's why we do family constellation. I just made this for you to repeat it. It's nothing new. It's exactly what we talked about. Just to repeat in short, family members related by blood in direct line are belonging to the family system in 7 generations, while you or your client you're working with is generation number 1. Yeah, always generation number 1. Partners and former partners are normally belonging to a family system in 2 generations, maybe 3. Rarely, but possibly in 3. Siblings and half siblings belonging also to the family system in 2, maybe in 3 generations. So that would include a brother or a sister of a grandfather or a grandmother, right? And then the not blood related family members who belong to a system are those who belong to the system through action. And that can be a victim or a perpetrator. And these belong to the family system back in 7 generations. They don't stop at generation number 2 or 3, and they very often are actually seen in a earlier generation than that, in a family constellation. And then we have the advantage and disadvantage givers in the system, and they also belong to the system back 7 generations and not only 2 or 3. And what that is, we will all talk about that. That's what we do today. Okay, so that's another repetition just to make sure that this has sunk in. There are 3 ways to belong to a family system. The first way is through blood. The egg and the sperm is forming the system. So in our modern days, if you have IVF and a sperm donor, the father you grow up with, but is not the biological father, will not show up in the family system as a blood-related father. It would be the guy who donated the sperm. Even if nobody knows them. The other possibility to belong to a family system is through destiny. And this is what you have in partners. The partners come in, it is not by chance why you have a partner. There is, so to speak, God's hand plays a role. There is destiny behind. And a good reason why we have a partner and we don't have a partner, or why we leave a partner or not leave a partner. And this has good reasons, and this is all also part of what we discover in a family constellation. And the third method how one belongs to a family system is through action. And these are the victim and perpetrators. And the advantage and disadvantage giver. They are not blood related. There might be some destiny behind, but in general, they do something that makes them part of the family system. They intervene with another family, because they all have their own, and then they intervene through action with another family system. That doesn't mean that these family systems combine. They will never combine. But that means that this person belongs also to his family system and to the family system where he, for example, killed somebody, right? That would make him a perpetrator. Or if it was a victim, somebody who was murdered, then both the family systems are not combining, but this victim becomes part of the family system of the perpetrator. Yeah? Okay. Very good. So we will work with all of that all weekend, so it will become natural to you, even if it sounds like a lot of information right now. So relax, no worries. Okay, so we are looking now at the victim and perpetrator situation and dynamic and how that works. So first of all, examples. So when we are talking in family constellation and in the orders of love about victim and perpetrator, we are talking always about a very severe interaction, meaning somebody got killed, meaning somebody got severely damaged, saying ends up in the wheelchair for the rest of the life, or a severe, I mean a really severe impact, right? Either as a victim or rape, obviously, or any other kind of massive physical or mentally abuse that is changing the course of the life of somebody. Yeah, that's actually the way to look at it. And there's something else that needs to come to it, that an element of emotion that makes actually this person be drawn into the other family system, which is the feeling of guilt and shame. So if there would be only, which is basically never the case, I struggle to find an example for that. So normally there is somebody, let's say somebody is killing somebody else for money, right? And you think, okay, well, he's just a murderer and the other is just a victim. But it's not so easy, because if you think at the emotional energy, and you're not at the bodies, one body is dead, the other lives, that's not what it is. The emotional energy is the perpetrator always feels guilt, although he would probably not ever openly feel it or talk about it, ever. But this emotion of guilt is within the act. So you can't have the act without the emotion, even if it's suppressed. So the perpetrator has the emotion of guilt, and the victim has the emotion of shame always. Of course, the victim is innocent, right? Or that's how we perceive a victim. But a victim is always ashamed, not openly, but always the emotion of shame is underlying in the victim because they're ashamed to be a victim. It's in the nature of being a victim, right? So this emotion of guilt and shame, which plays a vital role in a family constellation, makes this action so severe that the other partner, through this emotional bond of guilt and shame, becomes part of the other family system. This is why smaller accidents, they are not involved guilt and shame, are not causing this, as not accident, incidents, I want to say. Minor incidents are not causing these emotions and not this emotional energy. So they don't become part of the other family system. Otherwise, we would be part of so many family systems. Right? But that's not how an organized system works. The system wants to be precise and just organize these things that are so severe that they are changing the course of the whole family system. And these are through these emotions of guilt. And when you are on the complete training, just in the back of your head, bear in mind, when we go to module 4, we are looking at the vibration of emotions, and there you will see where guilt and shame is vibrating very low, and that nobody can live in this vibration. This is why it's always disguised as something else. So this guilt and shame is never in the open. You will never see it. Nobody talks about it. Even the perpetrator or the victim don't think they feel that. They feel something else. Yeah, but let's just go ahead with you, because that's a whole different topic. So this is an example for victim and perpetrator. There is an act of violence who is so severe that it costs somebody's life, or almost somebody's life, somebody's chance to live a life, a normal life, right? These victim and perpetrator, they are bound by destiny, although they become family members through action, but then they are together bound by destiny for the rest until this entanglement is lifted. The guilt and shame creates this entanglement. This is the emotion that creates it. And when I say love will heal, that's exactly literally what it is. In family constellation, and this is what is so controversial and why Bert Hellinger has been so attacked, basically, is in a family constellation, unlike our morals, yeah, you see that the only solution is for the family system and all members that the victim and perpetrator find love together, find their love for each other. That is what you see in family constellation. And this is so against the morals of society. You know, there's always a good and bad. There's a bad perpetrator, a good victim. No? But in family constellation, we're talking about the soul movement here, not the person. The persons are dead, obviously. We're talking about the soul movement here. The soul movement is towards each other. If they turn around and don't look, so like society wants us to believe, don't look at each other and turn around and walk their own ways, there's no healing. And I think that's probably the greatest problem people have with the orders of love from Bert Hellinger. That because this is nothing you can understand. This is just something you see and it works, you know. And of course, when you are going deep into the spiritual path and in this work, you understand it in the end anyhow. Because only love heals anyway, in the end. But, that's not everybody is ready for this simple truth. So, but in family constellation, you can see that. And the good thing is when you work with family constellation beyond your own personal growth, like if you want to use it professionally in your work to facilitate, you don't educate the people you're working with. You're not making a training with them. You use what you have learned. So you don't need to explain that. And so you don't have a controversial anyhow. Does that make sense? Okay. So they belong together. That's it. They are part of a family system and they belong together. And that is the same as with advantage and disadvantage giver or receiver. So I give you an example for that. One of the most common examples for advantage and disadvantage giver or receiver, or this entanglement, or this bond that they form is through money, mainly through heritage, through theft, through war. So when somebody is taking something away from somebody else who is so much that it can make a living, so we're talking again from huge amounts, not small thefts, yeah? It is like generations ago, like just think about the Second World War in Germany. The Nazi Reich took away the land from the Jewish people, the businesses. They just took it. They gave nothing for it. They went to the what is the English word? The Konzentrationslager. They went to this camps. There's a word for it. They and gave the land and the businesses and the money and everything else to German people. And they took it and they made something out of it. And now imagine that has never been so. Some have been sold after the war, not all. A lot of this has never been sold. And now 3 generations later, in our generation, they don't even know where the land comes from. But it was a disadvantage that somebody of this family had, and now this somebody is part of the family system. So this is how it works. And there would be an entanglement with one of the family members in this generation now, current times. And this is how we solve it. When we find this disadvantage and advantage giver at that time where it happens and heal it there. So after this is also like they are obviously becoming family, belonging to the family system through action. But once the action has been done, they are bound by destiny together until it is solved. The same dynamic as in victim and perpetrator. So you don't need to learn the double. It's the same dynamic. It's the same healing movements that are coming up for both options, either victim perpetrator or advantage or disadvantage giver. They all have this hidden emotional energy of guilt and shame. And this is how they create the entanglement. And again, love will heal because they belong together. So once you find in a family constellation the advantage and the disadvantage giver and receiver, and they find a way towards each other, the person who's entangled with one of them from the current generation will feel the relief. And that's family constellation. So if you would not know who belongs and you would not look out for somebody who had this disadvantage a few generations before, you would never be able to help to heal. Yeah? So this is why knowledge comes first and then the practical application, because you cannot see what you don't know. All right? Okay, the next members of a family system who belong are the so-called lost children. This is something that comes up in family constellations all the time. And it has a big impact of the current generation, of the first generation, if you think of the animation. So what am I talking about when I'm talking about lost children? There is the lost twin. So hands up who has heard of the lost twin. Francesca? Gabriel? Good. Okay. So it is a fact that has been proven, I don't know when, 10 years or 15 years ago or whatnot, way after Bert Hellinger started with family constellation, that every 10th pregnancy, which results in a normal, healthy baby, is in fact a twin pregnancy, and that the second embryo dies whenever in the first 3 months in the womb of the mother, and only one survives. And very often, this is before they went to an ultrasound and saw it, but it's after the heart started to beat, which is very early. Heartbeat starts with 5-6 weeks, right? The first ultrasound is 12 weeks. So there's lots of time for an embryo to, heartbeat stops. And once the heartbeat stops, then the embryo is dead. Now for the surviving, and it is tiny, it's tiny, it's little matter that has already formed. And when you see it actually physically in the other child, sometimes as in form of a lump. So when children or adults have a lump, not big, just a lump, just something you live with, you're used to, and then you decide probably it's in an awkward spot or for whatever reason to take it out, then the surgeon and is actually looking at it, what it is, it will find tissues of skin, of nails, of hair, all the cells, right, that the embryo had developed very early, which is combined to a little lump in the other child. The lost twin can also be in the placenta, so it is not necessarily always in the surviving child. It could be also in the placenta. Why does it matter? That's the question. It matters because this lost twin, or the twin that is lost, is in a traumatic experience for the surviving child. And it does come up in family constellations. Because when we're talking about who belongs to a family system, it has been proven that the lost twin does belong to a family system, although it was just the beginning of an embryo. But when the heartbeat starts, that's where it starts. So every child, if you will, where the heartbeat has already started, belongs to the family system. And this is just so you know where to look if you have a family constellation and you want to bring in all the children to make a complete picture, which we will all practice, a complete picture of the family, yeah. And then the members of the family, the children, they feel there's somebody missing. Often one is really struggling, the representatives of the children, of course, one is really struggling and really physically feel incomplete. And that's the surviving twin. And to add the lost twin to the family constellation and allow the lost twin to take its place in the right order of the children brings the relief to the whole family, and especially to the one who has a traumatic experience with losing the twin. So this is the first lost children we are talking about, is a lost twin. The next one is the hidden special needs child. So we are not nowadays, special needs children are very well integrated in our world, right? So that's not a point. But 2, 3, 4 generations before, that wasn't the case. There was another moral. It was like people were ashamed to have a special needs child, and they hid it. They hid it in the basement, or they sometimes they gave it away, or they let it starve, or horrible things happened because they were ashamed of this. They just, it was just the moral. They didn't want to be the parents of a special needs child. In family constellation, this will come up because you will never have heard there would be probably great, a grandfather or grandmother nobody talks about, or somehow a person nobody talks about, and then this comes in, and then you can see that it could be also in the 4th and the 5th generation. So one nobody talks about, that is maybe a hidden child that has lived, didn't die, but hasn't been acknowledged as a family member, and that can cause an entanglement in this current generation. So that's the second a possibility. The third one, the child who was given away, that happened also not, well, but that still happens, I suppose, somehow. But it definitely has happened in former generations a lot. Children has been given away because they were, not born outside of a marriage, or situations like this, right? These children definitely belong to the family system, but nobody talks about them. Nobody knows about them. And the beautiful work of Bert Hellinger is to have developed or discovered this methodology to make them visible and give them a voice and a face through the representatives. And once they find their rightful space or place, then the whole family system is feeling a relief, and an entanglement is lifted. We have the aborted children. This is very common in family constellations, very common also in this, the generation you're working with. Clients who have aborted children and not thinking about it as being part of the family, sometimes not even telling it because they just think that doesn't matter. But then in the family constellation, it comes up as a missing person. Somebody was missing. And then that could be an aborted child. And you often see that when you have a representative who feels like a child, who acts like a child, sits down, feels small, sees themselves as a child, but has sometimes anger, right, towards the mother, parents, or somebody else, or sad or something. So it's very obviously when you do the work to see when a person that is missing is an aborted child. And then when you ask the mother, obviously she says, "Oh yes, yes, oh yes, I had when I was whatever, when I was 17, I had." This is nothing bad. So again, this is why it's so controversial for normal people who hear about Bert Hellinger's work. That doesn't mean that it is good or bad or anything. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about morals. We're not talking about you should abort or not abort a child. We're talking about the fact that a child was aborted, and that it belongs to a family system, and it needs to be seen in its rightful place to heal the family. That's all, right? Same with the miscarried child. Of course, that happens often, but all these children, they are playing a role in a family system and coming up in a family constellation if that is the topic you're working on with your client or with yourself. Now, a little bit look forward to module 4. it has been shown in a family constellation, and I just briefly want to put that in here for the complete picture. It has been shown in family constellations. I had that quite often, that the miscarried child, or the soul of the miscarried child, comes back later. So when you have a family constellation, you often see that it is the same soul. So who's miscarried is the same one who then later was born. That's quite nice and beautiful to see. Birna, yeah, you want to say something? Yeah, go ahead.
That's an experience that I had in a constellation
Yeah.
with another lady. She found that the boy that my mother lost before the miscarriage. I was carrying it with me, and there was kind of a debate that he's supposed to be the one living. There was the belief that he was the one living, and I was kind of being looked after by him.
Ah, yeah.
So in the constellation, to have a representative as a death, and say, okay, who do you want to go with? Because the guiding person will say, I don't know, somehow she guided, who do you want to go with? And he said, I like to go with such and such. And she
Mm,
said, that's the right thing to do.
mm,
And then to finish the constellation was to say the goodbye, and but it was mainly to find myself
yeah.
after this constellation. And then we found that, and I was
Yeah.
shocked that this happened,
Okay.
but it was then afterwards was that change there.
Mm, very good.
Mm,
Thank you for
yeah,
sharing,
yeah,
Birna.
surprise.
Yeah. Mm, right. Okay. So the stillborn child is also part of the family system, belongs to the family system, which is a child that is born naturally, so after 9 months or 8 months or whenever it was due to come, and didn't breathe. Right, that's a stillborn baby. And then we have also the child who died later after birth, either immediately after, or within weeks or days or weeks or months after. Often is not talked about, especially 20 years later, because the family has kind of was very sad. Obviously, it's a very traumatic experience, and then they try to deal with it with not talking about it, forgetting about it somehow, and the following siblings never hear about it, but they feel the gap. They feel they will struggle with something in their life. They do feel that somebody is missing. And in a family constellation, when you have representatives, they can clearly express that. And this is how it comes up. And again, by acknowledging it, by seeing this child as a soul who belongs to the family system, and putting them or giving them the right place and the right order in the family, a great relief for the family system comes from it. And somebody who had suffered before finds more happiness and freedom. So let's talk about the family members who belong to a family system bound by destiny. So remember, before we said these are partners, former partners especially. So we are talking about relationships here and how this all happened. So there are two ways to come into another family system as a partner. Either you have a lifetime destiny together. These are the relationships, they kind of go through thick and thin, until the last breath. Or you have partners that are coming into a family system by destiny for a brief time. So first of all, so you have a temporary one, or you have a lifetime partnership by destiny. I think we all know the term karma. Anybody doesn't know the term karma? So that's, obviously a Sanskrit word, but it's widely used now also in the West. Soul agreement, karma, however you want to call it. If you follow the world view that there are more than one life, which you should when you do family constellation, because that's what you see clearly in family constellation. You would be familiar with the concept that that's a soul journey. It has not only one life, it's more, and that there are some things that the soul comes with, carries with, right? We are not starting fresh when we are born. We are not a white canvas. So this is meant by karma, and soul agreements are referring to the astral world, where we're talking about in module 4, where you are meeting other souls to make agreements how you want to play this life on earth. You can have then this acting out, either karma or soul agreements or other circumstances in accidents, which are not accidental. Accidents are also always destined somehow to happen. Tragedies, when we think, oh, that's so tragic, or what a bad fortune. It's not a bad fortune. It's normally a destiny that this happens. Or diseases often are also um, uh, uh, acting out of destiny that you have, or somebody else, a relationship. Caring means you care for somebody else, also through soul agreement or karma often. This we talk about that when we talk about adoptions. This is one part, also where destiny plays a role. So when you're bound together by destiny, this ends by the fulfillment of the duty. So whatever you came for, whatever soul agreement, whatever karmic whatever karmic destiny you had, it is fulfilled, and then that's it. That's the end of it. It's other than the belonging through blood, which is never ending. It will always be there. But if you belong to a family through destiny, it can end. Yeah? So it's not forever. Through death sometimes, sometimes not. So that is something you see in the family constellation, if destiny ends through death or not. And the signs are, when we're talking about relationship and partners, somebody is leaving the partner although they still love the partner. That means they are bound together by destiny and the destiny was fulfilled. Or the other way around, somebody's not leaving the partner although no love is felt. So that can also happen. You all know probably somebody, you have somebody in your mind where you think, that's it. Yeah. So so this is why they were bound together by destiny. And the destiny had like an expiring date. It was fulfilled, and they can't or won't let go of each other. Then we talk about the forgotten or dismissed persons who are belonging to a family system. These are in general family members nobody talks about. And this is why if you are in a family constellation situation and you talk to the person who wants to constellate, it might be a friend or a family member or a client, or you think about yourself, and they talk about their issue and the persons they want to constellate and represent, and you have this feeling there's somebody missing. This happens because you're also part of the family system when you help, and you are connected to the morphogenetic field, so you will feel that somebody's missing. They are not talking about somebody. They're avoiding, which is for you is clearly there must be, and they just not talk about it. That is the important person in the room, right? So that's somebody who belongs to the family system, but nobody talks about. And why? Because they are either forgotten or dismissed. And this happens a lot. It's really staggering how often, because it happens in one generation, and then the next generation never hears about it. So examples for that is, or why this happens is they leave either either they are forgotten because they left the family conscience. They didn't want to deal with the family anymore. They just left. And the family said, okay, I'm done with them. I'm done with him or her, and we're not talking about them anymore. Or they have been dismissed by the family because of any kind of reason. Sexual preferences are a common one, especially in former generation, but probably still now. Or they vanished. It's like a war situation. Person just vanished, and then the people don't talk about them anymore because it's so hurtful, maybe, to think about them, not knowing what happened. So then they just vanish. They are obviously still part of the family system, but nobody talks about them. So it's not obvious. Excommunicated was in former generations a big thing. Then they had to leave the family system as well. I have heard just recently in a documentation there are still religious groups or sects or whatever who are acting like this, or indigenous groups who are acting like this. So they disown members or excommunicate when they do something, whatever they. I heard of this. Wow, this was something that really blew my mind. I heard of this traditional groups in Laos who were living in the mountains there somewhere in the forest in the mountains. And they had strict rules. If somebody had twins, they had to kill the twins. Otherwise, they were excommunicated from the group because they were considered to be evil, animal nature. Imagine that. I was really shocked. So they had to kill the twins, the parents, and then they had to be 1 year on their own, and then they could have come back. Oh my gosh! So unbelievable. So there is no good or bad. People do what they do, right? They have to deal with it. But this family system, I mean, I would wonder to do a family constellation, this groups. Oh my gosh, what comes up there? So just to say, although that was in former generations probably more common, it is still happening. It's still happening for the weirdest reason. And then the dead people, they belong to a system that is really important. Sometimes it's overlooked. In family constellation, there is no such thing as death, right? And that is really something that need to sink in. We are not talking about the physical bodies when we are doing family constellation. It's a soul movement. We are seeing the souls there, not the bodies. Although they can have gestures, words that are actually the same, the representatives have that the same as the person they are representing, yeah, but they are still representing the soul because most of the people, they are already dead that they are representing in former generations. Why do the dead belong to the system? Again, because we are looking at the soul movement. The soul is that what moves on. The soul is on its journey through lifetimes. And so they are getting entangled. This entanglement is what you see, and it doesn't end with the death of the person. The entanglement stays. The family system is keeping the information in the morphogenetic field available for the situation when some is able to look at it. And that is the client, or you, or your friend, or your family member you work with. And then the morphogenetic field is revealing the information through representatives that are needed to see where the entanglement is with somebody who has passed away long ago. It's just for us doing family constellations, that doesn't matter. It's never an issue. So we are never deciphering between somebody who's alive or who's dead, right? this brings us all to the question, who or what is it then dying if this is not an issue in family constellation? Isn't that a good question? I think it's a very profound question. And I would like you, being on the training, to look at me, have a direct experience with it. Don't worry, don't need to die to do that. But we will have we will have a exercise later on, maybe at the end of today, where I will guide you to experience that a little bit. Because the question who or what is dying cannot be answered academically. It can only be experienced. Yeah. Actually, that's what I said. We have an exercise. So now, before we go into the break, we talk about adoptions. Normally, by this time, hands are coming up. What about adoption? Because this doesn't fit in any of these, right? In any of what I have talked about. So first of all, where do I start? So with an adoption, there are two ways. You can entangle in the blood-related family. So first of all, entanglements are only in blood-related families as a rule of thumb. Yeah, so that's what we think about. We think about, so if you have a client who is an adopted child as an adult, of course, who was adopted as a child, and you make a family constellation for him or her, which has mother and father, these are not the adoptive parents. These are the real parents, the blood-related parents of this child, even if he never or she never knew them. Yeah. Because they are part of the family system. Remember the little animation with the blue and purple people? They were the blood-related. Sperm and egg. That's it. Simple as that, right? So that is the rule. So you need to know that. That's the rule. The second is some family constellation. I have to say it is not very often in these cases, but it can happen that one of the adopted children coming in because they belong to the family system, but they would be bound through destiny, right? Through action, because they have adopted this child. And there must be an emotion somehow involved that goes beyond the normal caregiving part of it. So an adoption can cause an imbalance or not. So how does that happen? Where's the order there? Where's the order of love in adoptions? So first of all, we have to think about adoptions not as caregiving. If you would like to give care to a child who needs care, you can give care. You don't need to adopt it, right? That's the normal way. As long as I'm talking about Bert Hellinger's order of love, not my personal opinion, right? Just to reinstate that. That's how Bert Hellinger looks at it. That's his order of love. As long as a child has parents physically, this child should not be adopted by somebody else. That's how he looks at it. If the parents are not able to look after this child, they can give it, or the state can give it to a caregiver to look after the child. But to take the child out of the system of the parents who are existing and create a new system for the child, that's not how a family system works. The family system doesn't look at it like this. It is still the parents are the parents. So if there is no reason for a child to be adopted because they are parents, and they are probably, even if they can't look after the child, then they are probably aunties or grandparents or whoever, that would be the better way, that they look after the child without adopting it. If there are no parents because they died, that would be the only, due to the orders of love, appropriate way to adopt a child if it hasn't has children. So if a children is adopted, although the right order would be caregiving versus adoption, that causes an imbalance when it is for selfish reasons. For example, and we are coming in a kind of a situation of advantage, disadvantage, given things like that. So a selfish motivated adoption is, for example, and I actually have somebody in my mind, when somebody wants a playmate for an only child. So I know this situation. Somebody had 3 children. They were all grown up, and then this woman had a new relationship. And in this new relationship, a new child was born. But now there was a gap of 15 years between the siblings, the half siblings, and the new child. And the mother didn't want that this child grows up without another sibling in the same age group. So she adopted a child from Haiti. There was this, that is years ago, there was this catastrophe where lots of children were, in need of care. So she adopted that for the sole reason to have a playmate for her daughter. That would be a selfish motive, and that would cause an imbalance, right? And or something else is a substitute for so if somebody's child has died and they are emotionally so attached and can't bear it and think they get over it if they adopt another child, which will never happen anyway, but if that's the thought behind it, that's another selfish reason which can cause an imbalance. And how does this imbalance happen? The family soul is compensating for it. So often in a family constellation, partner leaving, own child leaves or dies or doesn't want to have anything to do with the mother or anything. And then when you ask, and all of a sudden there comes, oh yeah, I adopted a child. So that happened. That happens. So be aware, adoptions are to be handled very different than an own child. Adopted children following different dynamics. And that's again not about morals, and it's not about like if you are thinking of adoption, you should do it or not do it. Everybody is free to decide whatever they want to do, right? It is just if they come for help to you and you apply the orders of love, you can help. Because the imbalance will be or the imbalance will be lifted. And whatever problem is caused in this family system will be dissolved in this way when you acknowledge the order, the right order. Okay. So let's see what comes next. So again, and because it's such an important information, I want like you to sink that in. When you, this is a normal way, when you make a family constellation, you see a family constellation and there is mother, father, and child, it is the sperm and egg parents that you see, even if they have never met and they know nothing about their families. Yeah, this is why where they are blood related. Okay, so we have 1.5 hours together, and I think we should all stretch our legs and maybe take a sip of water, go to the toilet, and we gather back in 10 minutes. So wherever you are, I have 35 minutes, so we are meeting in dot 45. Yeah, and please unmute and also turn your video off and come back 10 minutes and put everything back on. Yeah, cool. And remind me that I press the recording button, please. Okay, see you in a bit.
Okay, Susan.
Here we go. Done. Then I share the screen. Okay, so let's proceed. We are talking about at this stage the impact of what we have learned, belonging in family systems and family constellations, as far as we haven't touched on it yet. So, in family constellations, you only see the people who belong to a family system. That is the first order of love. Yeah. And it is really important and quite profound to understand that, because you would be sidetracked in a family constellation if you look at any other persons who are not belonging to a family system, because they would not have any impact and you would not find any solution. Even if they are part of a story that seems to be important to the mind. Yeah? So to learn the first order of love, who belongs to a family system, is why we start with it, absolutely fundamental and crucial for the success of the work and for your own personal growth, obviously. Yeah. In family constellation, these are the persons you work with, because this is where the entanglements are that you can help heal, right? And of course, often the story that is shared from the client or from the person who would like you to help is including other people. Yeah, that's very often. They're talking about other people that are not belonging to a family system. So the only thing is, you don't need to listen to that. You don't need to be sidetracked by that. They can talk if you want them to. That's not a problem. But when you start your work, you work only with the people who belong to the family system. Yeah? Okay. So that's fundamental. Secondly, how does this all come together? Oh, it's not sharing again. Why? I really don't understand that. You don't see that, eh? No. Okay. What am I doing? I stop sharing again and do it again. I have to Google that, why this happens all the time now. It's really bizarre. Um, so here we go again. So we talked about the belonging and how important that is to abide the first order of love. Only work with the persons who belong to a family system. Secondly, you need to think of if you think of the what happens in a family constellation, in a family system, then always think, which is the best kind of depicturing I can think of a stream, literally a stream that starts at the source and goes downhill towards the ocean. That is how the movement, the energy moves in family systems as well. That's actually how every energy moves, but this picture is nice to see. Because in family systems, the love, which is the energy, the love flows from the source to the ocean. And when you have an entanglement, that is where there is a rock in the stream. And the love cannot flow anymore. The water cannot flow, it's blocked. What you do in a family constellation is you take the rock and lift it and put it aside to the shore so the love can flow again. And this is why it relieves the whole generations, not only the one you're working with. Because the undestructed flow of the energy or of the stream or of the love is freeing every member of the family system in one way or the other. That is the beauty about the work and why it has such a deep impact and why we love this work, which is hardly seen in any other kind of therapy or work that we do. And the beauty is it also affects the generations to come. So all of us who are thinking about children that's the best way to help the future generations, is to lift the entanglements of the former generation. Because this is one less entanglement they have to worry about, or they can be entangled with. When we think about morphogenetic fields and the morphogenetic field of a family system, we are always looking at this information that is revealed to us that are traumatic, right? So we're talking about death, murder, rape. We're talking about all these traumatic incidents. They are stored as information in the family system, in the morphogenetic, from the family system in the morphogenetic field. What is not stored in there are the happy memories. Why is that? Ever wondered? But this doesn't come up in a family constellation? Never. This is because it is not stored as in form of information. It is stored in form of love. So the love is nourishing the family system. This is what nourishes the family system. This is what nourishes yourself and the family system. But if the love is obscured, interrupted, disrupted, somehow stuck, it becomes an information that needs to be stored in the morphogenetic field to be revealed later, because it needs to be looked at and solved one day. Because the family system is thriving towards nourishment, like a cell is thriving towards nourishment, right? Not towards destruction. So it needs to keep this information as if it would be present, and waits for this one family member in whatever generation who has enough, or the greatest love of all, and who has therefore the guts to look at it. Because it always takes boldness and courage to look at these traumas, or to take on an entanglement as a soul agreement. It takes courage. And only the souls who have the greatest love are actually doing that. And this is what we see in family constellation. So if you see in a family constellation a happy family, what can I say? Everybody's kissing and hugging and loving each other. Well, it's not a family constellation. It's maybe a nice workshop. Let's call it the hugging workshop or something, but it's not a family constellation. Yeah. So, and I also at this stage want to talk about the newer versus the old family constellation. Bert Hellinger has, up to probably now 18 years ago or something, called, not his family constellation, not the old one, is called family constellation. And he was going the way that he was always placing the families up with representative. He always works in workshops. He never worked one-on-one or with figurines or anything or online. He had always physical workshops, like large groups mainly. And then there was a client to work with, and then he chose, or the client chose, representatives for the members of the family system who are playing a vital role in this constellation. And that's how we worked. And so we would always put up a representative for the client, and then for their father, for their mother. Remember this build with this picture with the 7 generations, and then maybe some grandparents, and see where the energy flows, and he takes it from there. And that is still how a lot of facilitator work. It's a solid way to work. And we talk about all the practical aspects in module 3. But it's a solid way. But then he discovered something great, because he discovered that actually, if he's not interfering with the representatives, they actually have their own movement. They move on their own. He doesn't need to suggest them words. They know what to say. And that was a big step for him. So this is what he then called the new family constellation. or the movement of the souls, or later on going with the spirit mind. And that's just for you as an information that you know we are doing the new family constellation. So what that means is we are going right to the entanglement. We are not going through our generation, which makes it a lot faster, a lot more spot on, and as I think, also a lot more effective to work with the client. However, if you have already had family constellations, or later on you go to other family constellations and they are a bit lengthy, and all generations are there represented by representatives, that is what we consider the old family constellation. When it's a Bert-Hellinger method. So we are doing the new. And then what I think what's coming next is, now Bert Hellinger passed away, and he would not have called it that way, but I would like it. The discovery of the virtual reality and the virtual room has led me to believe that we are taking it another leap further now and taking it beyond that even. And this is what I like to call the next family constellation. Because what we are now discovering is we come together with ease, beyond time, beyond countries, beyond anything, guided by the morphogenetic field. Much more options are there. It's much more uh, interesting. And also what happens is everybody is at home, which makes it so different, because at home it has been proven that the representatives or the people at home in a family constellation workshop, and you see that when you do the virtual workshops, or you have witnessed that and yourself being representative, you're so strong, so much stronger connecting to the morphic field, as in this workshops we normally went to in person. And that is why we feel so much more safe and secure at home. We are less self-conscious, less stressed. We're not worried about the group at all. And in our own environment, we seem to open up a lot easier to the morphic field. And this takes us really another step forward, which is obviously nothing that Bert Hellinger will ever experience, but I think it's our duty. And I'm very blessed and grateful that I can do that, to forward his teaching in the next family constellation. And you, of course, it's the best part. Okay. Just as a side note, it's not our main topic here, but I just want to say, when I talk about family constellation, you can also, not only when we talk about family systems, that doesn't mean that you cannot constellate anything else. You can actually constellate everything. You can constellate organizations, you can constellate countries, you can constellate working places, you can, whatever. It is unlimited. There's nothing you cannot constellate. I had a constellation with a dog one day. There is nothing you cannot constellate. But what you need to know is, what you're working with is always a family system. Remember, don't forget that. So if you have a if somebody wants you to constellate an organization, maybe an organization they are in, having a CEO, or they are self-employed and have employees and whatever. What you look at are family members, the ones who belong in the first order. They have different names, of course. Yeah. And very soon, with practice, you will actually see there's the mother, there's the father, there's maybe an ancestor. You will see that. They are the actual representatives of whatever the client wants you to look at. So whatever you constellate, you can constellate everything, it will always comes down on back onto the family system of the client. That's the order, the first order of love. And I've never seen it any different. Right. That's a good thing. You don't need to learn anything else. Only who belongs to a family system. That's the souls or the energies or the persons you work with. Right, now we come to the topic conscience and destiny. So we are talking about the personal conscience, we are talking about the collective conscience, and we are also talking about what I have translated as the conscience of the spirit mind. And you will see what that is and how that affects the orders of law. We're talking about destiny and common destiny, and we're starting with personal conscience. So, what is conscience in family constellation? I don't want to be too academic about it and try to make it as practical as possible. Just action is always guided, as a matter of fact, by the conscience. So when you do something, you have either a good or a bad conscience about it. There's no other way. You cannot just act neutrally. It is, try it. It's kind of impossible, right? So that's one thing. Then the next thing is harmful actions are often based on a good conscience. Think about a war. You know, people are killing people and they have a good conscience. How is this even possible? So conscience and good and bad is something different. That meaning every action has a conscience, and the action is not, the conscience it is not, cannot be seen as good or bad. So that's an information you need to know when we go further into this. Also, conscience only works in systems. That's another thing. You as a person, you are a system in yourself. You know how many cells you have and bacteria, and it's a huge system. So you are not one solid block of, I don't know even what, matter. You are a very sought after, delicate system, right? And this is why you have a personal conscience as well. And then you have the other conscience. We are coming to that collective conscience and wider conscience than that. Another piece of information is outside a system, the conscience reveals its true face. So the conscience only works within the system well, but when it goes and interacts with others, it shows its true face. So, for example, if you have a good conscience doing something, you can either have a good or a bad conscience. Let's say we normally do things that we have a good conscience, but that's like how we work, right? And then you interact with somebody else and they find that disgusting what you do. This is why you meet another system and they have another conscience. So they wouldn't do it because they would have a bad conscience if they do it. And this is why good and bad has nothing to do with the conscience. And something that you find is completely okay has to stand the test, when you reveal it to others. And that is especially for, like in religion, you can see that all the time. How one religious group is considering something as completely having a good conscience do it, and another religion would have a really bad conscience do it. Like, for example, some religious group have a very good conscience to slit open the throat of an animal to have it for a festivity, like a donation to gods or whatever. And you in your religious group find it disgusting to torture an animal like this. So that's just an example. That's quite obvious in religion. The conscience is always tribal, animal-like, and therefore not a good guide. Why is that? First of all, it has no more moral aspects behind it. Once it leaves the group, it could be, not what people would think of good or bad at all. So that's not a good guide. It cannot tell you if something is good or bad just because you have a good conscience about it or a bad conscience about it. And connected with the emotion of guilt and atonement, many bad things have been done with a feeling of innocence. Again, the war situation, right? People are murdering people and feel innocent about it. But in a family constellation, this comes up, although they had a good conscience. So you would think if they had a good conscience, why is this stored as an information in the morphogenetic field? Because the action is what counts, not the intent and not the conscience. Yeah? That understood? Guilt and innocence are not equal to good and bad in one's action. So if we feel good about things or innocent, or worse, if we feel guilty about something, it might be not even a bad thing. You know? Just think about, some people might feel guilty when they drink wine, as a matter of example, while others would not feel guilty about it, wouldn't they? So this is not a measurement of what's really going on, right? And we need to be aware of that, especially if we're working with people who are coming with these emotions and suggesting to you that this is either good or bad. No? Because this is sidetracking. We are not buying into that, because it's just the conscience of either this person or the group they are coming from. And obviously they don't know that. And for them, that's all they know. And why that is obvious, because hang on, that's not the person. Yeah, that's another information. Conscience is nothing you can really detect. It's a feeling. It's a feeling of guilt or innocence, or good or bad for that matter, right? So you cannot argue about somebody's conscience. It's nothing. It's like taste. You cannot discuss it, you know, and you cannot detect it. It's something felt.
Then can I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
I don't understand. I mean, if something bad is done with a feeling of innocence, it leaves us as a mark in the family system because
the action counts.
Because the action is judged by
the family soul. So it's not judged, it's an action that is causing an imbalance in the family system.
And the imbalance,
it's not good or bad. It's one of the cases we discussed before. If you think of a victim and perpetrator, it's if somebody is causing the death of somebody else with a good conscience, it's still an act that is stored in the family soul as to be solved.
And it is an act that has an impact on somebody's life.
Yes, exactly. So that is exactly the point. There can be this feeling of a good conscience behind things that are not love.
But it doesn't matter if, like, even the victim is not unhappy. It's like
what are you thinking of? A victim that's not unhappy to be killed?
Yeah, or maybe a child, or somebody who doesn't develop, or somebody who does, like a disabled person who doesn't develop
because of the action of somebody else.
Yeah, who doesn't develop an emotional baggage for that. No, because it's in the soul.
Exactly. So remember, there's always the emotion of guilt or shame attached, even if they don't show it.
Yeah. Okay.
So the victim always has the emotion of shame, the perpetrator always has the emotion of guilt, but they won't show it. Maybe. But the family soul stores it. That's what it's supposed to do. And then the family system is looking out for a descendant who has enough love to entangle and look at it. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
But they are not conscious about it. They store it.
No.
So they act, but they are not conscious.
Yeah.
This is a very important information for me, because so you act, but you don't know that their own morphogenetic field stores it, and the system stores it as well.
Yes. through action. Yes. No morals, no good or bad. It's just if one of the cases we discussed in orders of love happens, that's what you get. Doesn't matter
because
what
I told a friend last. Yeah. So every action has a consequence.
Yes. Yes. And there's only two actions in life. One is love and one is not love. Whatever you call that, right? It's like, it's so simple. You know, there's nothing in between. Nothing neutral.
But then when the action of love theoretically doesn't leave a mark in the system, does it?
Exactly. You are creating more love, more nourishment for the family system and for the whole world or universes. That's what it strives on. That's the energy that drives it. Everything that is not love creates a mark in the family system, needs to be solved. Needs to be one day transformed into love. Because it will keep it until this happens. Yes, Lana.
So how does it work when it goes by generations? Okay, nobody knows that it's being carried. So how do we know what happened in the soul that then has that love and the courage to, let's fix this that is happening in the system?
So are you thinking about the actual healing process in a family constellation, or are you thinking about the person who was to constellate?
The first one. The system.
The healing. Okay. That's exactly what we're not talking module 1. That is what we're talking about module 2 and 3 about. So the practical aspects is what is coming up. At the moment, we are learning in module 1 what we need to know in order to apply it. Yeah. And in module 2, we are talking about the actual dynamics in family constellations and the actual methodology, how to go in with the family constellation, find the dynamic and apply the healing that is needed, which are basically words and gestures. Yeah. Okay, so patient, it's all coming up. Okay, so so we want to, if we're not talking about ourselves, but also the family, we have this drive to secure our belonging to the family system and go with what is perceived as good and bad in families, which we are talking about in the collective consciousness. So we have this urge to adopt a kind of conscience. That's just human nature. Let's put it that way, right? So we cannot just be neutral. That's not how we are designed to be. Yeah. What else can we say about it? The scientific background from all of this, which I talked about, is that we are actually living in brain states. Who knows the brain states? Ever heard of it? Alpha, beta, theta, delta? Yeah. Okay. So when we are talking about a personal conscience, we are talking about the first 7 to 8 years of one's life. That's where the personal conscience is formed, not later. It's a conditioning. You can also call it conditioning, right? You are conditioned by society, by your parents, by the world you're living in. Your brain, your mind is conditioned. And you're translating that into feelings. So you feel good about it, for example, right? Because when you're in the state of theta, which is basically hypnosis, 2 to 6 years, or in state of alpha state, which is around 5 to 8 years, in both these states, you are vulnerable to you soaking up everything. You're just soaking it up from your environment. You have no discernment. You have no means to, filter that in any way, shape, or form. And once you have it all soaked up, it becomes automatic behavior for your survival. And that's how it happens. And that is how a personal conscience is formed. So there's really nothing you can do about that. And that's by design. So when this is by design, there must be something valuable in it, right? It's not that the humans are bad design. Who thinks humans are bad design, by the way? No, they are quite good design. So we have to live with it and see what happens if we are fully understanding that, and how we use it actually to our advantage or to the advantage of humanity. So the personal conscience defines the boundaries of our behavior and creates judgment of the behaviors of others, right? So you have your conditioned behavior, which we call personal conscience. You have a feeling of good or bad about things. And then you start later, after a year, who knows, like this school kids, primary school kids who come along and tell you what you have to do. Have you had one of yourself? Or you met one? Yes, they start in this age and they come and they tell you what to do. Because they now have discovered they have an ego, they have a personality, they have their own conditioning. They see you doing something else or somebody else, and then they feel, no, that's not right. That's not, because I know how it works. How does an 8-year-old know how it works? Of course they don't. But they have completely convinced because that's what their conscience tells them. And this will continue until they die if they don't personally grow and evolve. Right? Therefore, to go beyond these boundaries of the personal conscience, one has to experience a bad conscience and a rebellion against the family. So hands up who feels like a little bit of a rebel in the family.
Like a rebel?
Yeah, a rebel.
Or so,
like who's challenging the family a little bit.
Maybe me a little bit.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a very good thing, because you need to feel a little bit bad to overcome your personal conscience. If you always feel good about what you do, you are always supporting the conscience, the personal conscience you have. So it's a good thing to feel bad about things that you start to do differently to what is expected from you. And then, of course, with that, a feeling of guilt comes instead of innocence, which is also a good thing, as long as it doesn't stay. It shouldn't stick. It can come up, and then you can let it go. That is also personal growth, depends on it, how able you are to deal with this feeling of guilt. Yeah, that comes up. Subtle. I'm not talking about like big decisions, big things, leaving everything behind, and or you don't have to that. It could be small things, subtle things, but not to fulfill the expectations and needs of the parents, for example, is a good way if you go your own way, which you have to do when you go your own way. So personal conscience in relationships. So when we talk about the personal conscience in a relationship between families, then another important information is it always fulfills 3 basic needs. The first need is the need for bond. So there is a need for bond in the family, between family members, and that is fulfilled through attachment. Right? So you attach, we call it love, but in truth it's attachment, because love is unconditional. You would love your own child as much as a child at the other side of the world. But that's not true. If you have your own child, if you're sitting in a boat, in a lifeboat with your own child and another child from somebody else, and only one child can survive, you as a mother, it's your nature to protect your own child, right? Hello, that's attachment. That's not love. That's attachment created as a normal way to, secure survival of the family. So that is the need for bond. The second basic need that we all have is the need for order. So we want a certain order in our relationships. We don't want them chaotic. And we are creating this order through obedience. So we have rules and we obey them in one way or the other. That's just to fulfill the need for order. And then the third need you feel in relationships is the need for balance. And that is one big thing that we are working with in family constellation. We are balancing out, or we compensating unbalanced relationships. We also bring order and bond between those who were forgotten, not seen, who belongs together. Yeah. So in the family constellation, we are looking for the bond, the order, and the balance. The three basic needs are often in conflict with each other. This is when it becomes a little bit messy, and this is when you don't see it as much, but this is normal, and the conflicts are coming up. And like as a matter of example, because we coming back to the conscience, it follows different aspects. So, for example, if you're in need for bond with a family member, you want to attach, be attached or attach yourself to or be attached, you feel guilt if you are excluded. You feel guilty. And that is very often for children. So we have a lot of childhood traumas, which are solely because the child feels excluded. Why is that? Why would it become traumatic? Because it feels guilt. I am the source of this exclusion, right? And this is typical for childhood traumas. And there's a beautiful way to clear childhood traumas, which we actually, in family constellation, which we actually look at in module 4. And that is the source of the true trauma is this feeling of guilt, not of the happening itself. No? And of course, this exclusion, it might be actually or not. It might be only a perceived exclusion from something. It might not be an intent by the parents at all. Or this typical example when parents are separating when the children are young, how the children feel guilty about it. They don't feel guilty because they have the perceived conscience that I did something wrong. They feel guilty because they feel excluded from father or mother or whoever leaves.
Then what is supposed to be happening so they don't feel guilty?
You have to work with the trauma. Or do you mean when you are separating? Do you mean the actual example?
Yeah, like what should be happening in order for them to, it's not just telling them, no, it's not your fault.
So from my point of view, it is not so easy. Things are happening. You cannot, as a parent, completely avoid that your child has a trauma in any way, shape, or form. Things are happening. Yeah. What happens is they can be, the good news is that all can be looked at and cleared. You can either, as a mother, look at it in a family constellation and clear it, or the child grows up and finds its own healing way to deal with it. In my view, life is as such. We need these challenges to develop for personal growth. We cannot develop on a bed of roses. Otherwise, life would have been designed differently. Without any traumas or any aggressions or anything, any disadvantages. But it's not like this. We grow with it. So we cannot avoid that, although we as parents are desperate to, protect our children and give them, everything they need. And then you give them everything they need, and then they have a trauma because they've been spoiled. You cannot avoid it. We need to grow, obviously, in this life through these challenges. So when this is happening, it happens because life throws it at us. And then we all find a way, one way or the other, to deal with it. And that's, I think that's just the flow of life. Right? Okay. If you're, that was an example for the need of bond. If you're in need for compensation, you probably feel receiving as guilt and giving as innocence. Now, who knows somebody from himself who would rather give something than receive something? I know lots of people who are really not good at, being gifted something. Why is that on earth? Why is that? Because it's a conscience. It tells them because of the need for compensation, they can't feel good about receiving. They can only feel good about giving. Right? It can be the other way around. This is just an example, right? It can be completely the other way around. And if you're in need of order, you feel fear of punishment as guilt and loyalty as innocence. Because that's what order gives, punishment or a treat, right? Either or. This is how order works. So you can apply these 3 basic needs in relationship, and you can find examples for it where it doesn't align with our perceived ideas of good and bad. Right. Now we're coming to what was it, Francesca? Okay. You get all the recordings. Don't write too much at the moment. Just let it sink in. The collective conscience is also something we work with in family constellations. So the collective conscience exists in addition to the personal conscience and is function to is enforcing the orders of love in the family system. That's what it really wants to do. So you have both. You have a personal conscience and you have a collective conscience at the same time. It aims to integrate the excluded and forgotten, for example, the dead family members, by choosing another family member, which would be alive, to represent this person, and therefore creating an entanglement between these family members. Right? So that's what we call an entanglement. We're talking about a family constellation. And the collective conscience has this need to compensate or to balance that out. It cannot live with just letting that happen and nothing happens. It needs to be balanced. If an action leads to an imprint in the family system, then it needs to find a way to balance that out and create an entanglement in order to do that. This entanglement is not, so now we come back to the principles about conscience, and everything we have said before applies here as well. The entanglement is not felt as good or as bad, right? So a lot of people come to you in a family constellation talking about what they are really, feeling under, what they want to change. And when it comes to a family constellation, something completely different shows up. And they don't feel bad about that. They feel a great love, actually, in fact. For example, to the entangled person. So it is not always suffering that an entanglement creates. But there's the suffering in the real world, so to speak, in the body, in the mind, in the emotion, in the emotional suffering now that wants to be solved. And through this, it leads through to a family constellation which reveals an entanglement which is not felt as suffering, but which needs to be lifted for the family system to move on and transform it into love. So you don't need to expect your client to suffer in a family constellation. That's what I want to say. Yeah? Because it might has a good conscience about it. How it looks then, if it doesn't look like suffering, it looks like repetition. As if somebody is repeating or replicating the person he's or she's entangled with, feeling the same emotions, having the same job, looking similar, or sometimes they've been given the same name by the family system. Yeah, that happens quite often, actually. Yeah. the representative is feeling a sensation of being twisted and torn at all times, that's when you see an entanglement. Cannot focus on his own life, feeling of being, what's coming up, controlled remotely, some people say, like robots, not fulfilled or happy or driven against or his or her own will, or living two lives. These are all descriptions you get when you're dealing with somebody who's entangled with another family member, right? Remember, note, only one who belongs to the family system. Can be somebody they're entangled with, nobody else. If the excluded family member is seen in a family constellation, this entanglement can be lifted and the client feels an enormous relief and freedom. That is what happens in family constellation. It is the seeing of that what creates the entanglement. The acknowledging of it is already healing. To bring it into the open is already healing. To come back to your question, Virna, what are we doing? We reveal it. That's the first step. There are 3 steps. The revealing is the first step, and that is the most important one. So when we're talking about how to facilitate and how to apply family constellation or knowledge in the family constellation in part 2 and part 3, then you will see the acknowledging of this dynamic, the finding of it, and then to be able to let it be visually perceived by the client heals. And then there come the next steps. But you can never work if you don't go the first step, if you start with the second step. You need to have the acknowledgement first. Because family constellation is not an intuitive work. It is based on knowledge and experience, not on intuition. Right? I know there is definitely a room for intuition somewhere, but it's not family constellation. What you do there is you're connecting to the morphic field and you're getting the information. It's not intuition. And you apply them due to your knowledge, and the outcome will be certain. Yeah? So that's a different kind of work. That's what we do, acknowledging the dynamic, and that is the first step to healing. Because remember, this relationship, this kind of entanglement was in the dark before. It was not seen. It comes up in a family constellation as something new. Yes, Chica. I can't hear you.
Mute.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question if there is any personality or character who is easier to be entangled. In order to help client, is there any
I don't understand. No, say it again.
No?
Say it again.
Is there any specific character like self-sacrificer would entangle herself easier, or is there anything
not
to
that I know
prevent who entangle?
No, not that I know
it
of.
Can't be prevent.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
It's completely, you come with this, it's a soul agreement. You come with this destiny, you be born with that. You be chosen, so to speak,
so you can lift
by the family system.
You can lift any entanglement, but you cannot prevent entanglement from happening.
No.
No. Okay.
No. Not as I know of.
That's a shame.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe you do it all the time and you don't know it, but I don't think there's a way of knowing it. Maybe it's happening, but how would you know?
Yeah.
You don't know what otherwise would happen. Yeah. All right. Okay. So, so the entanglement is often repetitive and seen in previous generations. That is also a hint and also something to work with. it has been shown that if you have a situation where you see the entanglement with your client, with another person, that this is a repetition of an entanglement from 2 former generations, right? So you might not lift it before you're not going deeper, but there will be signs why that is, and that we talked on later in the train. But there will be signs. It will be obvious. So you don't need to worry about it. Just something to know for now. Yeah. So that's what we just said. It is the destiny of a family member to be entangled, often chosen before birth. Yeah. And remember, family members are not only blood related. You can be destined to come in as a partner into the family system, to entangle with somebody of this family system, to make this entanglement seen and to heal it. And that happens, and that shows in family constellations often. So that is a common entanglement. Meaning you have a soul agreement with this family member or one of the family to come together, marry or be together, whatnot, and through partnership and destiny entangle with a person from the system. Also, children can be entangled, obviously, not adults only. Often you see children are entangled with a former partner of one of the parents. That happens as well. The deep unconscious love of one family member to the excluded one makes way for the healing movement of the soul, right? So there's always love in between the entanglement between the entangler and the entangled person. And that's where you see the entanglement, because you will see in a family constellation this love, which is often against all odds.
Maya, if I wanted to constellate an entanglement with someone, the requirement will be just that. Can I have an entanglement with?
It's always an entanglement. That's what we work with in family constellation. Yeah.
So, yeah. So how can I ask for it if I feel that it's with a particular one?
What do you mean?
Like if I were to say that this person that I know, I feel that there could be an entanglement.
Ah, no, you don't feel it. You don't feel it. That's, as I said, it's not intuitive. You learn it over the course, exactly how you go about it. So it will show. It's not, you don't need to feel it. Don't worry about that. That's all coming up.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to go into it, eh? You want to skip the theory and you want to go right into it. Unfortunately, you have to have the theory first.
As Latin are all about feeling and emotions.
Exactly.
Well, this is a German discipline, you know. It's
like
the German.
It's very scientific. That's actually a good thing. Actually, I would like to talk about that a little bit because I think that's important. There are, since the last 20 years, obviously, there are so many people who are doing family constellation. And if you go to one or you see one, or you hear about one, you think, what on earth had that to do with Bert Hellinger? Nothing. It is completely intuitive. There's nothing that people are included that are not in the order of love. In the first order, they are not belonging. They do things that they feel they need to want to do. All sorts of things. Yeah. This is not family constellation. Not how Bert Hellinger has developed family constellation. It is just a group experience of some sort. Yeah. And they call it family constellation. You have the same in yoga. You have so much fitness yoga. That is not yoga, just as a matter of example, because I'm a yoga teacher as well. But, you know, but people use this word for all sorts of things, right? So why you are here with me, divinely guided by your family system, I assure you, is because you want to know how to properly apply the wisdom and the experience of Bert Hellinger, who cannot pass this on anymore, this knowledge, in your life, for yourself, and maybe also to help others. That's why you are here. So we are not reversing and putting this all aside and going with our intuition into a group experience. We don't do that. We learn it properly, the German way, and then you are safe. You can do it. Okay, good. Okay. The collective conscience has boundaries. It includes only family members of the first order of love and excludes all others. Right? That is just important. The family system is only made out of the members that belong, as we have gone through before, and everybody else is excluded. Is no part. And we often have that if we have step siblings or a step mom or step, and then they are so close to the person because they were replacing a family member, but this step person is not in a family constellation, doesn't belong to the system, doesn't play a role. So if the client talks about a stepfather or stepmother all the time, it's just, it's not showing the real problem. It's a sidetrack, because you can't work with a step person because they are not belonging to the family system. So nothing would be revealed. It would be like a game or like a show or like a stage show or something, but it wouldn't heal. Right? You must unmute. No. Yeah.
But you did talk about victim and perpetrator.
Yeah.
If they're talking about step,
yeah.
then they
yeah.
might be victim of a perpetrator. Is that
so
how you?
They could be perpetrator, they could be advantage or disadvantage giver, they could be former partners or partners who belong to a family system in a specific way. But if we are talking about step siblings, for example, especially children, it is very unlikely that they become either perpetrator, a victim, like a severe, you know what we're talking about, or a disadvantage or advantage giver, for example, right? That's just in the back of your mind. So the fact that somebody is a step something doesn't mean anything. They have to be part of the family system through one of the dynamics we talked about. Belonging.
Wait.
Yeah.
Then there's another thing that I need to clear out.
Yeah.
So that all the victims or perpetrator or other things have to be in the family system. They can't come from outside of the family system, or they can.
They become a part of the family system if through action. They are okay. So we can have perpetrators that are blood related.
Yeah.
They are already in the system. They are already belonging to the family system. But if you have somebody who doesn't belong to the family system and becomes a perpetrator, this soul comes in to the system from outside. Yeah. Obviously, there are lots of examples for perpetrators in the family system.
Is it be stronger if the perpetrator is already in the family system and then become perpetrator? Is it stronger?
Maybe. I'm not quite sure if I can work with the word strong. It's always like the thing you're looking at. It's the entanglement you're looking at. Yeah, it is an entanglement.
Yeah. Is it strong? Yeah.
I don't feel like there are stronger or less strong entanglements. They are just entanglements. You know.
So it doesn't matter.
No, because they need to be cleared. Because they become a burden. This is why they show up in the family constellation. So you cannot see, you know, the strength, like this is not a term we would use, strong or not strong entanglement, because they are there.
Can I say, would it be more difficult to clear
No.
if there was a family member and then became perpetrator? Doesn't matter.
No.
Okay.
No, definitely.
I want to ask. Thank you.
Could I give 2 examples that happened in my family?
Okay.
My grandmother's second husband that she had, a partner, he became a perpetrator with some other family members, like my grandmother's grandchildren.
Uh-huh.
And in another one that happened in the family, well, happened with one of his daughters first, and he mothered her child. Yes, so he got her pregnant, and then years later on, 12 or 13, I don't know how many years, he kind of touched grandchildren. And then there was another case, another man was the husband and wife, you know, my auntie, and then he got pregnant his own daughter.
Yeah.
So these 2 guys, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a very good example, Werner. When we have a family constellation, we are not looking at this as good or bad from a moral point of view. We are looking at the entanglements. B, if you have a perpetrator like this, you have more victims. And there's an entanglement between each of them, right? You have more victims, obviously, right? And also, it is probably not possible to clear that all in one constellation because of the complexity. Yeah. But it's not stronger, the entanglement. It's an entanglement. So it's just complex, more complex. That's it, you know. And it might take more constellations to go through all of this.
It could be possibly really complex from your point of view. If I was closer to the action and I'm doing my own constellation, and you don't know what happened there, but I do. Yeah, and
it will show up anyhow. So this is why we work. We are working with the morphogenetic field, and the information will be revealed. You know, so it will be probably revealed one aspect of this in one constellation or all. You don't know. This is a decision by the morphic field, what it will reveal. And with meticulous work, which we learn here, which we do, we will be able to follow the guidance we get. And then we go as far as we can go in this session. You know, and we see. So we can never talk about a constellation in theory. That's not possible. We can talk about the basics of the orders of love in theory, but we cannot actually talk about a constellation in theory, because everything that happens in the moment, guided by the morphogenetic field, where you apply what you know, and then you have an outcome. And then something has changed, and then you take it from there. And even the change would be probably nothing that you would expect it. You have no expectations, but we are not going into the other parts of into the other modules here, because this is not what we're talking about, right? We're not talking about the actual work of a family constellation. Okay, so let's go. What else is on my slides? The collective. So the collective conscience rules over the personal conscience. If they are clashing, the collective conscience always wins. That's what it is. The personal conscience tells a family member to do something. That's an example, because it feels right. Yeah. So, for example, making a child want to atone for the sins of the parents, which is a dynamic that we look at in the second module, because this is what children do in this family system, right? That's just what the collective consciousness tells them to do. That's like a tradition, if you will. The collective conscience is not tolerating this behavior as a violation of the second order. We learn that next module, second order of love. Yeah. and overrules it by creating an entanglement. That's how it works. It's quite simple once you know all about it. It becomes very complex, and then it becomes very simple in the end. Then we have the conscience of the spirit, or the spirit mind. This does rule above both personal and collective conscience, and it unites both as well. So it dissolves any boundaries and any disagreements between this conscience. It itself has no boundaries, no judgment, no morals, no good or bad, and it doesn't exclude anybody or anything. So the conscience of the spirit, as Bert Hellinger calls it, which we can also just call the divine, or however you want to call it, in the end overrules all of this. So that's a good news, yeah? It's a good news. So if we can access this conscience, which everybody who's on the spiritual path is striving to do, then we be able to dissolve the boundaries and the discrepancies in this conscience. Its role is to unite whatever needs unity and let the love flow where it was interrupted, and it is creative, and it is love itself. One can experience this conscience. Remember, your experience conscience is with either good or bad. That's how we roll. Yeah? You can also experience the conscience of the spirit, but this time not as good and bad. You experience as a feeling of belonging, contentment, guidance, and harmony. That's the feelings you get. If you have this feelings, you know your personal and your collective conscience is overruled, so to speak. Yeah, by tapping into the divine conscience of the spirit. And when you are facilitating, coming back to the practical world, but just very briefly, when you're facilitating, you want to be in this state. Yeah. If you're not in this state, you're probably not in the right space to facilitate. Okay. Okay, what else is to say? No feelings of guilt or innocence are present. So you can look at everything with love. You know? Peace, tranquility, guidance is felt. It is felt also to be in a place where no problems are to be solved. That's important information. You feel everything is at the right place in the right time, including yourself and what you're doing. The conscience of the spirit is accepting everything as it is without the wish to change anything, although change is happening, right? That sounds like an oxymoron or a contradiction, but it's not. It will all come together. In the conviction that the orders of love will find their way to heal the family wound, right? You can always be assured about that. Because this is like a natural law. The water always flows down to the ocean. The love always flows from one generation to the next one. Always, you know. And the morphogenetic field is making sure that nothing is forgotten that interrupts the flow of love. So this obstacle can be lifted, actually, in the end. So how do we access this conscience? This is a quote from Bert Hellinger. I, of course, have translated it. To allow the personal and collective conscience to dissolve into it. That is the way and the destiny of the new family constellation. So let's talk about destiny. Destiny is felt as a feeling like pre-existing, out of one's control, a strong urge to achieve something. It can be towards good or bad, and it is supported by a good personal conscience or a good collective conscience. Remember that. So you are not feeling bad about it if it is your destiny. Somehow, even if it's strange, it feels, but you don't feel bad about it. Common destiny is the destiny of the whole family system. You have a destiny through soul agreement, maybe, or karma. There's a common destiny of the whole family system. They have a destiny as well, right? And this is all in sync. Again, also the destiny is completely dissolving in the conscience of the spirit, because there's only healing and love present. So now the big question is, when we talk about destiny, what is about free choice? Is there such a thing? Do we have free choice? That's a very philosophical question, but it has very practical applications when you do family constellation. What do you think? Any opinions? Do we have free choice? No. Vilma says no. Francesca says yes. Yes. Shika says no. Vilma says
we have free choice. I do believe in the in free choice. There is both karma and free choice, regarding to my opinion. Otherwise, we wouldn't live. No, we would be robots coming to do without having the free choice of good or bad or whatever. So we're here to make our own karma in a way. Yeah. We make karma every moment, right? With everything we think, say, and do. So
yeah. That's a very good way to look at it. I think it's probably a trap to say that, because there's really no answer to it.
Yeah, because when you talk about the soul, and when you say that when we come, we already bring things. Hello, did you choose it? No.
Exactly. So the answer is to both yes. You know, there is destiny and there is free choice. Both is correct. Yeah. And they are not excluding each other. We just think that. In truth, they are working together and with together, you know? And sometimes we have the feeling of free choice when there is destiny. And sometimes we have the feeling of destiny when there would be free choice. So there is not really an answer to this question. And the beautiful thing about it is you're not getting answers. You're only getting questions. And then you live with the questions. And they, through your life, you become the living answer to your question. That's on the highest level how education works, right? Okay. Good.
Well, until now, we know that when a situation is happening, there is always a choice to, you cannot change it. You just can change the way you see it.
That's also good. Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that too. Very good. Okay, now we talk about guilt. Guilt is a big topic. So guilt is an emotion, right? It is not a fact. I mean, me being a former lawyer, I think, you know, you learn somebody's guilty as if that would be a fact. But it's not. It's just how society decides to, you know, rule things. But the fact is that it is an emotion. It only exists as an emotion, so to speak. Yeah. So it is felt rather than detectable. You can disobey. It's karma, again, action. You can disobey something and then you have to have the consequences. Right? That's easy. But that's not guilt. No? Guilt is the emotion that makes you feel bad about it. And remember, this has to do with your conscience rather than any objective measures. Right? It depends on your conscience. And the fact is, there is no good. Why? If you believe in destiny, how can you be guilty for anything that happens? You know? It's just what happens. You can't help it. It's your destiny. It happens. So still you are responsible for your actions. That's your free choice. You are responsible for your actions. You do have an action and then you have a reaction. Of course. Yeah. But that is not guilt. Guilt is an emotion that makes you feel bad about things that happen. Remember that. That's a very important information. Divine intervention and guilt. So if you look at the fact that there is no guilt, just look at what we call maybe divine intervention as well. or destiny and divine intervention, right? If that is a better term for you. So just as an example of destiny. So it's not only our action. We don't have the free will to do anything. There's also some things like divine intervention that comes in, into your life, and actions happen. Guilt is an emotion program before year 7 or 8. Remember alpha and theta state, when the children are in, that's where the emotions are created, which we live all our life with. And guilt is the biggest one of all because it has one of the lowest frequencies, which we will all learn in module 4 about, and the lowest frequencies, and this is why it's so hard to deal with. And it always causes trauma. Sticky stuff. And it's just an emotion. It's not even existing. Again, this is life by design, which is so fascinating. Yeah. So there is a reason for that. So we are not dismissing that as good or bad. It's just what it is. This emotion of guilt is the source of suffering. If you look at it closely, if there wouldn't be an emotion, there wouldn't be suffering. Yeah. You're not suffering your actions, you're suffering the emotions of your actions. And now finally we talk about death and karma. We talked about karma before, we don't need to dwell on that. First of all, fear and death. Because we are already finished with our 3 hours, I want to shortcut that. I just want you to think about it. If you haven't done so yet, if there's anything else you are fearing other than death. So it's like a homework, Write in your notebook, what are you fearing? Is it the fear of dogs, or the fear of falling, or the fear of being burned, or whatever, yeah? And then think it through in this situation, and what happens then, what happens then, what happens then? And if you don't come to the state where you say, well, in the end, I'm actually afraid of dying, yeah, you haven't been worked through enough. Because if you do this exercise, you will inevitably come to the fear of death. So fear of dying is the mother of all fear. Right? So we have to look at death if we want to overcome fear. Can we work as in therapies or in family constellation if we are afraid? Is there any work we can do for our clients? No, we cannot work with them. We cannot help anybody. If we are not overcoming our fears, how can they overcome their fears? Right? So this is what we do. This is why this course, this training is also of foremost for self-growth, right? Because you can only work in the original way of intended by Bertellinger of family constellation if you overcome the fear of dying. Which is what we do, because knowledge comes first. Death and karma, we know when we talk about karma, karma is action over lifetimes to lifetimes. So it's neither good or bad, it's just an action, and then the reaction is in another life. That's all it is. Karma can be in this life, action and reaction, or it can be over multiple lifetimes. In one lifetime, you put an action into force, and then in the next lifetime, you have the reaction to it. So that's karma. It's not a punishment. It is not good and bad. It is no conscience. It's a simple fact. Everything has action and reaction. So this would be the point where I do the exercise of death with you, but you are all tired from 3 hours, and I think we can easily do that tomorrow. So because tomorrow will be more practical anyhow. And in case I forget it, remind me that we do the exercise either tomorrow or on Sunday, whenever we have time. And for now, I would say I see you tomorrow. And if you have any question that hasn't been answered, put it in your notebook, and then we talk about that tomorrow. How that sounds? All good? You all good? All happy faces? Nice. So I say goodbye to everybody, but I have a talk to Wilma. So it's just stay tuned, and everybody else, please Go about your day. Go about your day.
Bye.
And I see you. Bye-bye.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Yes.